Hi, this is David Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. And whether you're watching with our friends over at Tony Time or wherever you watch or listen to your podcast, a lot of people listen. Apparently, we have over 1,000 subscribers on Spotify of people who just listen. I don't know what any of that means, but it certainly sounds impressive. And it's amazing how many subscribers there are just on different platforms and things. But anyway, wherever you listen or watch your podcast, as always, we're happy to have you along. Well, it's Elul, and a service that HaKadosh Baruch Hu provides for me, somewhere around the end of Av and the beginning of Elul, to help get me into the mode. I'll give you an example. I don't remember how many years ago this was, but it was towards the end of Av. I was driving, and for some reason, this cop pulls me over. I wasn't doing anything. Let me see your license, registration, Fine. Yeah, you're hitting the wrong stuff. She says, your insurance was never paid. You've been driving for almost a year, because I take care of it in September. This is at the end of August. You've been driving for a year without insurance. I said, no. When I went to America and I gave it to somebody to pay. She shows me, says it was never paid. That's like a major ticket. I have to go to court. That's not, you don't just pay it, fine. And afterwards I asked the person, they said, oh yeah, I forgot to do it. And then I said, I gave you a check. And I think I said, yeah, I never cashed it. So, okay. So I have to go to court now. And I've been driving for a year without insurance. I said to the judge, why would I want to drive without insurance? I get into an accident, Anyway, it's a terrifying thing to go to court. A terrifying thing. But that's down here when it doesn't mean anything. Imagine you're going for Melech Malchi Amlachim. You're going to be judged on your life. There was another August when my brother was visiting, and I was literally, not figuratively, people say literally when they mean figuratively, I was literally on my street 2 houses away from my house. And my phone rings. I didn't have my phone in the little speaker. Today it's all Bluetooth. Back then you had to put your phone into the little speaker slot, because I was just coming back from shul. And I see my brother's calling, and I pick up the phone, and I hear a siren. There's a cop right behind me, 2 houses away from my house. And I pull over, and and I said to him, look, I have a speaker here. I just was coming back from shul. My brother just called me. He's in from America, He says, Ani mechuyav liten lecha doch. I have to give you a ticket. Now, I have never in my life talked my way out of a ticket. Nothing. In fact, if there's a whole line of cars that are parked someplace you're not allowed to park, and I park there too, I'll get a ticket. Nobody else will, but I will. Kiddush Baruch Hu works hard to keep me on the straight and narrow. And I remember this was just before Elul. It says, Ani mechuyav liten lecha doch. I said, Ato lo mechuyav, ato yochol. Zelo oto davar. You don't have to give me a ticket. You can give me a ticket. The power is in your hands. You could say, okay, I'm going to give you a ticket. You did something wrong. I see you 2 houses away. I see that you just picked up the phone then. I see you weren't using the phone. But I could be a stickler, and I could ask for din. I said, but when you do din, it's din for me, it's din for you, it's din for your family, it's din for all of Klal Yisrael. I think the last thing we need now in Israel at this point, this was during the Lebanon War, shows you how long ago this was. The last thing we need now is more din. We need more judgment. I said, or you have the power to do rachamim. You could say, I see that you made a mistake. I'm going to let it go. I'm not going to give you a ticket. But the power is in your hands. You have din, you have rachamim. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to do either one. And the guy said, okay, I'll let it go. Don't do it again. the lady cop who was in the car goes, Ma? I burst into tears. I couldn't believe it because I never talked my way out of a ticket. And I thought, now I'm going to go into Rosh Hashana. I have to talk my way, out of Kiddush Baruch Hu. I got to give him the same argument. So you can imagine how these things tend to set the tone. Well, yesterday, I had to wash my car. Sometimes you want to wash your car, you could wash your car, but I had, without realizing it, parked under a tree. And many of the birds that nest in the tree do not understand good hygiene. And they used my car as a bathroom. And I had to wash my car. Now, that had happened a week before when I got gas, but the line was so long, and I said, I'm not going to wait online. But now it was a week. I'm sitting with this stuff, there's acid in this stuff, and pigeon droppings, and bird droppings. It burns away. A lot of people don't realize this. During the 70s, during the economic crisis in New York, so they cut back whatever they could. And one of the things they cut back on was bridge maintenance. So every year they're supposed to scrape off all the old paint and then prime it and then paint it. So instead what they did is every other year they would just paint it without scraping it first. The problem is that there's a lot of pigeon droppings, and pigeon dropping has uric acid in it. So they just painted over all of it, and eventually it wore away the cables and they had to rebuild the Williamsburg Bridge, which is a lot more expensive. But, so I got this stuff in my car. Anyway, by gas, there's like 4 cars in front of me. And I'm waiting online. And this, what I would normally call an older fellow, but now he's probably my age, I don't think of myself as an older fellow, but probably about that, And he indicates to this younger guy if he could cut in front of him, and he said yes. And so he pulls in. Okay, so the 2 cars go before him, and the guy who's in charge of the car wash says, go back to the end of the line. And he says, no. The guy let me in. He says, no, you cut off other people, go to the back of the line. And the guy says, no. He says, then I'm not washing your car. He says, okay. And the guy gets out, and he stands there. And the 2 guys go into their little hut where the car washer people, turn on the little machine. 40 minutes and 100-degree temperature. And the line is getting longer and longer and longer. This guy won't move his car, and the car wash people won't wash it. 40 minutes. And everyone keeps coming over. What's going on? What's going this? What's that? Nobody's budging. No one's going to make a move. Finally, after 40 minutes, the car wash people, they cracked first, and they washed his car, and then the line moved through. I was 2 cars behind him. This made a deep impression on me because, this guy could have turned around and gone to the end of the line. It would have cost him less time. The car wash people could have just washed his car, and they would have done another 10 cars in the 40 minutes that they were sitting there waiting. I couldn't leave because I had to wash my car. I had left the week before because the line was too long. I'm sitting there for 40 minutes in 100-degree temperature. And I realized Kiddush Baruch Hu was sending me a message. What was the message I think Kiddush Baruch Hu was sending to me before the Yom Noraim? Ki ein anu azei panim ukshei oref loimar lifanecha Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokeinu Avosenu tzadikim anachnu v'lo chatanu avo anachnu v'Avosenu chatanu. We are not so mechutzif and so stiff-necked to say we didn't do anything wrong. But I'm telling you up front that us and our parents and our grandparents have done things wrong. Why are we dragging our parents into this? Because very often, people do things because that's what they do. my daughter has this wonderful routine. She teaches in seminaries, and she's like, I don't know. That's what we do in my house. In my house, everybody makes fun of each other. I mean, it's what we do. It's what we do in our house. Everybody curses. That's what we do in our house. I don't know. That's what everybody does. But when I came to those words, kshei oref, we are not so stiff-necked. I may have mentioned this once upon a time, but there was a tekufa when people told light bulb jokes. This was back when you were allowed to say offensive jokes. Today, of course, you'll get canceled and blocked on Twitter and Facebook and all these other kind of things. I don't even know them all, but people used to tell what were called Polish jokes, because Polish people have a reputation for not being particularly intelligent, and so people would tell Polish jokes. You can't do those anymore, of course, but once upon a time you could. And one of the jokes that they used to tell was, how many Polish people does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer was 4. 1 to hold the light bulb and 3 to turn him around. That was the joke. I don't know why this caught the popular imagination, but it gave rise to all kinds of light bulb jokes. Yeah. In Poland, they tell a joke. How many Americans does it take to change a light bulb? 1. How many this does it take? How many that does it take to change a light bulb? All these light bulb jokes. There were even from ones that they would do. How many Jewish American princesses does it take to change a light bulb? 2. 1 to get the Diet Coke and 1 to call daddy. So, okay, there were different ones like this. How many Jewish mothers does it take to change a light bulb? None. I'll sit in the dark. How many Breslov Hasidim does it take to change a light bulb? That's it. There's only one light bulb. When it goes out, you don't change it. A whole bunch of these. But there was one, because there's always wisdom. You have to look everywhere to find wisdom. How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is 1, but only if the light bulb wants to change. It's a brilliant observation. Yeah. I remember hearing a shmooze from a Tzvi Kushelevsky during Elul, when the pasuk says, "Kilo b'shamayim hi v'lo me'ever layam." It's not too far from you. Says Rashi, it's talking about Torah. Torah is not so far. You don't have to climb a mountain. You don't have to go in search of the truth. The Kodesh Baruch Hu makes it very close and very easy for you. The Ramban says it's talking about Teshuva. Teshuva is very easy to do. So asked Tzvi Kushelevsky, but it's not. You see, it's not. It's hard to change. So he brought the difference between Shaul and Dovid. The way the Torah presents the stories, Dovid's story was much worse than Shaul. Of course, the Gemara says anyone who thinks that Dovid was chayte is making a mistake, so you can't understand the simple way. But the way the Torah presents it is that he sleeps with a married woman and then has her husband knocked off, which is pretty serious. Yeah. Shaul didn't kill the king of Amalek because he wanted to leave the schus for Shmuel HaNavi to be able to do it. That was his chait. And yet Shaul is not forgiven, and he loses the malchus. And Dovid is forgiven for what appears to be a much more serious crime. So, Rabbi Tzvi says, read the story over there in Shmuel. Shmuel comes to Shaul, and Shaul says to him, Baruch Hashem, you're here. I did everything that Hashem said. He says, you did everything? He says, yeah. He says, I don't know. Hashem told you to kill everything, including the animals. I hear animals. Okay, the people wanted to take, some of the best of the animals to bring as korbanos. I wasn't going to tell them no, but I did everything that Hashem said. The answer is that when Shaul was confronted, he said, I didn't do anything wrong. I don't even understand what you're talking about. I did everything Hashem said. Nasan Hanavi comes to Dovid. He said, there was a poor man, and he had a little sheep, and he fed the sheep from his table, and he took care of him. And then this rich man had lots of sheep, but he took the poor man's sheep, and he killed it. So he says, wow, that's really rotten. That guy deserves to die. But instead, the halacha is that you have to pay 4 times. And Nasan Hanavi swings at Dovid in front of everyone and says, that's you, Dovid. You're the one. You're the man who did this. Now, Mustama Dovid knew the Gemara that said Dovid didn't chayte. He says, what are you talking about? First of all, he wrote her a get before he went out to battle, so she wasn't married. Second of all, he was a married b'malchus. Third of all, he had plenty of explanations. Instead, he says, chatosi, and there's a psik in the middle of the pasuk. The pasuk stops in the middle of the pasuk. Why? Because he was supposed to say, chatosi avisi poshati, but he was so pained he couldn't even get out the words. But you got a lot of explanation, I know. But a Navi is coming to me telling me I did something wrong, so I'm going to try to talk my way out of it. So said Reb Tzvi, doing tshuva is easy. Recognizing you have to do tshuva is the problem. And he told a famous story with Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Sher where he sees a bacher during Elul. And he says, so you're doing tshuva? He says, yeah, of course, it's Elul. He says, what are you doing tshuva for? Averas. Like what? So, well, I'm sure I've done Averas. He says, well, let's go down the list. Avodah Zarah? No, I never did Avodah Zarah. Oh, good, Baruch Hashem. Shvichas Damar, did you ever kill anybody? No, I never. Oh, Baruch Hashem. Gilui Arayos? He says, no, Chas v'Shalom, Lashon Hara? Well, yeah, I have spoken Lashon Hara, but it was always for a toelis. It was for a useful purpose. B'tul Torah? Yeah, but I always had a cheshbon, but I had to do, and he goes down the line until the guy has no choice. He recognizes that things wrong. He goes, no. Quotes the pasuk, there's nobody in this world who's a tzaddik and doesn't do something wrong. Everybody does something wrong. So Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Sher looks at him and says, Russia, you're never going to do tshuva because you've never done anything wrong. He says, Shvichas Damim, you never embarrassed somebody in public? That's murder. Gilui Arayos, you never looked at something you weren't supposed to look at? Sil Shem says that's Gilui Arayos. You were Mavatul Torah. You spoke Lashon Hara, and the only reason you didn't serve Avodah Zarah is because the Anshe Knesset Gedolah were Mavatul the Torah for it, or you would have done that too. But you're never going to do tshuva because you never did anything wrong. Only if the light bulb wants to change. You have to recognize that I've done something wrong. We're not so brazen that we're going to stand there and hold up a line of people for 40 minutes because I won't turn around my car and get back in line. I'm not such a kshei aref. I'm not so brazen. I'm not such a mechutzif. I was learning in a koilo in the morning, balabatim, and there was this older fellow. He was a rav. He had been in Batzis Torah for many years. And he comes in, he's very upset. He goes, I don't understand you Americans. He says, I had to go get something at the store. There was no parking, so I double parked. I wasn't there for so long. And I come out, and this guy is waiting in the car, and he starts yelling at me. He says, you blocked me in. So what? So you had to wait 15 minutes. What's the big deal? He didn't even stop to think, maybe I inconvenienced this person. Gezel Zman is also called Gezel. You stole 15 minutes of this man's life. He had to drive his kids to school. Maybe he had to go to a doctor's appointment. What's he getting upset at me for? I may have told this story. I was in shul. I sit up front because I want to be able to hear the davening, and I know the talkers go towards the back. Anyway, this young guy, he looks like he had just gotten married. his friend, who's a bacha, comes over and they're schmoozing. They're schmoozing through the Mishaberachs, they're schmoozing through Birchas Haftarah. And when the Haftarah starts, they're still schmoozing. I can't hear the Haftarah. I said, Slicha. I can't hear. So the bacha goes back to the back, where he sits. And the Avrech turns and looks at me and goes, Oy vey! I was definitely old enough to be his father. I don't know if I was old enough to be his grandfather, but definitely old enough to be his father. Looks at me. Az is panim. Oy vey! I said to him, Az panim legehenim. It says in Pirkei Avos. Mechutzofim go to hell. He turned around. And my son-in-law was in shul. He said to me afterwards, I was davening that he would turn around because I saw you were just warming up. And I had a lot more to say. It's bad enough that he's sitting there talking. Go outside and talk. How do I care? I don't care if you daven. I don't care if you listen to laning. I don't care if you listen to Haftarah. I don't care what you do. But I'm telling you that it's bothering me. When I used to teach in seminary, I had 3 rules. I said, make sure your phone is turned off, because when it rings, it's very disturbing to everybody. There's no talking, and there's no gum chewing. And I said, I don't care if you put your head down and go to sleep, as long as you don't snore. I don't care if you doodle. I don't care if you walk out of the room and don't sit in the class. I marked you in for attendance. Go outside. You guys want to talk? Go outside and talk. But you have to sit here and talk? We're not so brazen-faced. And we're not so stiff-necked and stubborn that we would hold up a whole row of people for 40 minutes for a principe. I asked one of the people who was ahead of me, there was only 2 cars ahead of me, I said, why is there a problem with the machine? He goes, principe. It's a principle. What's the principle? He cut the line, they won't wash it. He says, I'm not moving. You're going to wash my car. We were going on vacation with the kids once. And for us, a vacation is a major big deal, going to a hotel, hotels are expensive, the time is important. So this guy comes, and we get into the van, and it stalls out on Kvish Achad. And so, of course, it's 100 degrees outside. I got about little kids in the van, and it's hot, and they're crying, and somehow he manages to pull over to the side. And he's waiting for a tow truck. The tow truck comes. He says he wants him to give him a charge. To charge the car battery. The guy says, okay, I want such an amount. The guy says, I'm not going to pay you that. So the 2 of them sit down on the divider. They each lit up a cigarette, and they're just sitting. And we're sitting in the car with a bunch of screaming children. So after 10 minutes of this, I held down a van. I said, how much do you want to take us to, I think it was there at Sion at the time. He says, okay. I said, fine. I took our luggage. I got in the car. He started throwing the luggage at me, screaming, yelling. I said, you give us a van that's broken? You won't even get it fixed? You're going to sit there in a Honda with this guy and just sit here to wait each other out? While me and my children are sitting here sweltering in the van? Principe. It's an amazing concept. And so we come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and we say, well, I did anything wrong. Okay, I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. And everybody, what do I do Teshuva for? Like I did bad stuff? Is there anything wrong with me? I'm a great guy. Din means that we get judged. And it means that there's a recognition, first and foremost, that I did something wrong. And that's the hard part of Teshuva, is admitting that you have a problem. Once you can recognize you have a problem, then you can start to address it. Then you could try to come up with some way to solve it. But if, like the young man said to Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Sher, I never did anything wrong. Everything I did, I have an answer for. I can confirm for. I can give an answer for it. So then what happens? Moshe Shapiro once, there was some issue. And he said to me, Dovid, al tiyeh akshan. He said to me, don't be stubborn. Yeah? Dig in your heels. Dig in your heels. So that's what we have to say. That's what we have to say before Kadosh Baruch Hu if we want to do tshuva. We're not so mechutzif and so stubborn as to tell you we never did anything wrong. Yeah, we've done things wrong. And therefore we have to figure out how we're going to change this. But the first step is a hakara that we made mistakes. We've done things wrong. Yes, we have sinned. Once you do that, then you can start to change. But without that recognition, you can't do anything. So Mirza Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, will soften our heart and unstiffen our neck and make us a little less brazen so that we can stand before HaKadosh Baruch Hu and say, we have done bad things and we want to become better people. And once we have that recognition, we can go on and do it. Okay. And that brings us to the question and answer portion of our program. Banish Benjamin asks, do personality tests like Dr. Jung's measure the actual middos that a person is born with? Do these tests correspond at all with Jewish hashkafa? So, there's a woman, Miriam Adahan, who put out a book about personality types and assessments. And she said that she did it based on a note in Jung's journal that he used to set it different up. And it's basically you assign people letters. And people are combinations. So either you're an introvert or you're outgoing, you're this, you're that. There's all kinds of different things, and you assign letters to it. And she's very careful to stress that this is not an absolute method. This is just a way of trying to understand people. However, my wife went to some Emet meetings, and people would talk about their husband or their children. They go, oh, he's such a WD-40. He's such a, C-3PO. I don't know what it was. They would immediately assign them these shorthand things. Now, the Gemara says clearly that there are certain traits that you're born with. It could have to do with your mazel. It could have to do with what hour of the day you were born. And it gives an example. If you were born under Mars, which is the blood planet, so you have a tendency towards blood. And so, if you're an average person, you'll become a butcher. If you're a tzaddik, you'll become a moil. If you're a rasha, you'll become a murderer. Yeah. So the fact that you have this particular midah, it means you can use it. But definitely people are born with certain middos. There's no question about it. Whether or not you can determine what those middos are through some method, I'm not sure. There was a time when you could. There were people who understood what we today call astrology. But today, my birthday is January 12th. So I used to think I was a Capricorn. And people I knew who were into astrology says, well, that makes sense because you're such a Capricorn. And they listed all the reasons I was a Capricorn. At some point, I realized that my Hebrew birthday is Shvat, so I'm really an Aquarius. So I told him, as it turns out, I'm really an Aquarius. He goes, well, that makes sense. You're such an Aquarius. And they listed all the reasons. My wife, who had the book on, personality traits, she started doing it with me. And when she was done, she says, this doesn't make any sense. You have all the letters. Because I'm a complex individual. And to try to reduce me to a bunch of letters is really very difficult. Yeah? Because people are complicated. I always say when I try to understand people, I say that, the Chazal say if you save one life, it's like you saved an entire world, because a person is an entire world. I said, that means that people are as complicated as the hardest sugya you ever worked on a piece of Gemara. You have to learn people up. You have to find the kashas and try to find the terutzim and understand what the svaras are and why people are the way they are. And to try to reduce them based on these kind of things is very hard. And that the problem is, as I saw when my wife went to this meeting, is once you do that, it's very easy to label people with those labels that you give them. So is there a method of being able to understand it? Of course there are. You can see there are certain people who are lazy and certain people who are hyper and certain people who are phlegmatic and certain people who are angry. And there are certain inbred middos that a person has to work on. But I think to come up with a method, shorthand to be able to figure out is going to be a lot more difficult. Anonymous asks, I was wondering if the Rav can explain the concept of Kiddush Hachodesh with messengers, especially on Rosh Hashana. Did that mean that everyone was working as if it were a regular day and then the Shluchim come and suddenly it became Yom Tov and everyone has to blow Shofer? No. Suffolk, they would keep the day as a Yom Tov. If it turns out the messengers didn't come, then they would keep the second day as Yom Tov. And that's why that even in Eretz Yisrael, there are 2 days Yom Tov. That's the reason why second day Yom Tov of Rosh Hashana is not like any other day. Because if you're in Chutz La'aretz and you have 2 days Yom Tov, why? Because the messengers did not reach it. And if you live someplace where the messengers were not going to get to you by Erev Yom Tov, then you had to keep 2 days as a suffix because you just didn't know. So when they would do it, so first day Sukkot, second day Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret Simchas Torah, first day Pesach, seventh day Pesach, you make Shechiyanu on both days, there's no question. But Rosh Hashana is a suffix. Is it considered 2 separate days or one long day? And that's why we always have the new fruit thing that you have to do in order to say Shechiyanu on the second night, because, we're not sure if it's one long day. But they definitely kept it. Well, maybe I'll say a quick word on this. Michtam El says that it almost never happened that they didn't know when Rosh Hashana was during the first Beis HaMikdash. They kept 1 day Rosh Hashana. They knew when it was. And he says the reason is because the first day of Rosh Hashana is for the Adam HaShalem, the person who's the perfect person that you're judging. And that's the person who gets judged in the first day of Rosh Hashana. But when Klal Yisrael started to drop in the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, so we had to be metakein that we ended up with 2 days of Rosh Hashana. And the Michtam Eliyahu says that the second day was to see if you were roi to be mishamesh the Adam HaShalem, if you could help out the Adam HaShalem. That's why I'm always careful to bid for the Kohen Aliyah on the second day. Because I know I'm not the Adam HaShalem, so I don't need the Aliyah the first day, but the second day I want it. Somebody said to me once, look, I'm clearly not the Adam HaShalem, so why do I bother going to shul the first day? I'm not being judged then. Only the second day. I said, because on the second day you want to see if you're roi to be mishamesh, the Adam HaShalem, if you can serve the perfect person. How do you think the perfect person's going to feel when he shows up to shul and there's no minyan? Because everybody stayed home and said, well, I'm not there. You want to show Kadosh Baruch Hu that you're there to help him out. That's got to be your goal in that case. Anonymous asks, upon entering a new Zman, can you give some insight on how to avoid burnout, especially when starting with so much enthusiasm? Goals. You have to have goals. Now, there's a famous expression, I don't know who coined it or where it goes from, but A masmid is not somebody who learns 24 hours a day. A masmid is somebody who learns 60 minutes an hour. Meaning, when I'm learning, I'm learning. I don't need all extra things necessarily. But what I have to do, I have to do. Rav Gans tells the story that he brought his son to the stipler to get a bracha, that before his bar mitzvah, that he should be a Talmid Chacham. He said, I'll give you a bracha, but how are you going to become a Talmid Chacham? What's your plan? Poor kid's 13 years old, man. The stipler said, I'll tell you what to do. You need X amount of time to daven, X amount of time to sleep, X amount of time to, to go to the bathroom and wash up and to eat your meals. And he went through everything. He says, that leaves you with 12 hours a day. He says, I guarantee you that if you spend 12 hours a day learning, from now until you get married, you'll be a Talmid Chacham. Now, person's got to be honest. Not everybody can handle 10 hours a day. So if I do 4 hours of a morning Seder and 4 hours of an afternoon Seder and 2 hours of a night Seder, that might be enough for me. I started Yeshiva Gedola. I was coming from a co-ed day school where we had an hour and a half of Gemara. And now I was suddenly thrust into a situation of doing a whole day of Gemara. So for me, my goal was just to see if I could sit there and not just run out of the room. I was working on what they call Sitzfleisch, just sitting there. Of course, with my ADD, which had not been diagnosed, and my dyslexia and everything else, it was very hard for me to learn. But I said, at least I'm going to stay here. That's my goal. I'm going to sit in the Beis Medrash for the amount of time that I'm supposed to be here. But I tell you, I was watching the clock. It was hard for me. So make sure you get enough sleep, because people in dorms don't, because they stay up schmoozing. Make sure you get exercise. When you have a break, go for a walk. If you're in better shape, go for a run. Get out a little bit. Get some fresh air. Exercise. It's good for your body. It's good for your mind. It's good for your soul. And don't eat junk. Eat healthy as much as you can. And that's it. And if you see that you're starting to crash, so switch to something. Do a little chumash, do some halacha, do something else that gives you a chance to rest your mind. I heard a story, I don't know if it's true, but they say Rav Gifter, when he was really exhausted and he couldn't concentrate in his learning, he would do infinite mathematics. That's what he would relax with. What's infinite mathematics? How many points are there between 2 and 3? Infinite. How many points between 3 and 4? Infinite. How many between 2 and 4? 2 times infinity. And you can multiply infinities. I don't know how it works. That's not what I do for enjoyment and entertainment. But listen to music. Do what you need in order to maintain yourself. Now, this is not a leap year, so there's only one Adar, and like I say, keep your eye on the ball. What do I want to accomplish this month? How do I want to get there? And try to work on that. I will do one more. Chana G asks, if an adult is doing something you think isn't safe, i.e., young people playing in the front yard without supervision, ignoring doctors' recommendations for a young child's nutrition, is it ever your place to get involved with a parent or an in-law or a sibling? If so, any suggestions how to do it in such a way that it will be received? Oh boy. The first answer is yes. How the best way to go about it is, I'm not sure. I was at the Aguda convention, and there was a atrium. So the talks were taking place in the ballrooms, which were 2 floors up, and there was this atrium, like an overhang, a balcony, whatever you want to call it there. And there was plants and things like that so that you wouldn't get too close to the edge. And this kid went into the things and was playing right up at the edge. I saw at least 5 people tell the woman who was talking to somebody, your kid's too close to the edge. She said, it's okay, I'm watching him. Sure enough, he fell. Oh, a lot of Hatzalah people there, they ran over. I don't know what happened in the end. I didn't follow up on it. But 5 people told her, your kid is playing right at the edge. She didn't care. She didn't care. I've seen this. I've seen this where people are irresponsible. I live here in Har Nof. If you know Har Nof at all, so Rehov Sholzin, there's a drugstore and a hardware store. This woman double parked her car to go into one of those 2 stores with the car running and a bunch of little kids in the car. Now, when I lived in Far Rockaway, we had a garage that, you came into a driveway and you went down to get into the garage. And we had been away and we came back. No kids were in the car. And the car was running, and neighbor came over to say hello. So I got out to say hello to the neighbor. One of my kids climbed in the front seat and moved the car into drive. So Baruch Hashem, it was just going into the garage and it smacked into a pole and my water main broke. And okay, but nobody was hurt. You have a car running with a bunch of kids in it right in front, double parked? And I said to her, when she came out, I said, this is unbelievably dangerous. One of your kids could have put the car. Okay, tada. So, if you think a kid is in a dangerous situation, that there's some form of abuse that's taking place, or serious neglect. When I was running NCSY, so one of the chapters, we did a region-wide fundraiser where we got these chocolate bars that you sell, and you get a certain commission from it, etc. And, it was a fundraising. Anyway, this one girl, she was given X number of bars, and she told the chapter advisor, I didn't sell them, I ate them. She says, but we gave you like 12 bars, She says, yeah, I know, but there's no food in the house. So they check out. The mother's an alcoholic. There's a string of guys who come into the house. It's serious neglect. So we went to social services and we had her taken out of the house and put with a frum family in foster care. And she said, you guys saved my life. There's a horrible book. It's a series of 3 books. It's called The Child Called It. Second one is called Lost Boy. The third one is A Man Named Dave. About one of the worst child abuse stories in America. This mother starved him, beat him, gassed him, stabbed him, burnt him. Which it didn't do to this kid. And eventually the school was able to get him out of that and into foster care. But he said, he ran away from home once because it was so horrible, and the cop brought him back home. He says, one time my mother kicked me in the teeth and I fell to the ground and I was all bloody, and I saw in the window the neighbor was watching. No one said anything. No one did anything. But eventually there was one teacher who became proactive and saved this kid's life. So if you're the person who wants to go and yell at the candy man who gives a lollipop to the children, I think you're being overzealous. But if you see a dangerous situation, then I think you're mechuyev to say something. Okay, that's it for this episode. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can leave a comment. You can send an email. You can sponsor an episode. You can sign up for one of our online shiurim. And until next time, I am David Orlofsky, and this is the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.